Mason didn't tell you? Those 4 words should not have made Caleb Foster nervous. Unfortunately, they came from Adrian Brooks, which meant Caleb's nervous system immediately filed for bankruptcy. Caleb stood in the Brooks family's kitchen with an overnight bag hanging from one shoulder and a sleeping bag tucked awkwardly beneath his arm, staring at the one person who absolutely was not supposed to be there. Adrian, Mason's older brother. The Adrian Brooks, 28 years old, recently living somewhere far enough away that Caleb had considered him safely irrelevant. Tall, dark-haired, unfairly broad-shouldered, currently wearing a charcoal t-shirt with the sleeves pushed just high enough to constitute a personal attack. Caleb blinked. "You're here. Excellent opening. Very intelligent." Adrian leaned against the kitchen counter. "I noticed." Caleb wanted to leave the country. Instead, he adjusted the sleeping bag under his arm as if this might somehow restore his dignity. "Mason said you were away." "I was. And now you're not. That is generally how coming home works." There it was. That tiny almost smile Caleb remembered far too well. This was bad. 3 years ago, Caleb had developed what he privately classified as a temporary and completely manageable crush on his best friend's older brother. Temporary had become intermittent. Manageable had become don't look directly at him when he rolls up his sleeves. Then Adrian moved away. Problem solved. Apparently the universe had filed an appeal. "Caleb." Mason came charging downstairs wearing sweatpants and one sock. "You made it. You forgot something." "My other sock." "Your brother." Mason looked at Adrian. "Oh, right." Caleb stared at him. "Oh, right. I forgot you didn't know. How do you forget an entire adult man?" Adrian opened the refrigerator. "I ask myself that about Mason constantly." "See," Mason said. "He's already making jokes. Family reunion." "We are not family." Caleb said it too quickly. Adrian glanced over. Caleb suddenly became fascinated by the countertop. Mason, blessedly oblivious, grabbed Caleb's bag. "Come on. Pizza's coming." Sophie gave me 3 horror movies we're apparently legally required to watch. Normal. Good. This was supposed to be normal. A sleepover before graduation. Pizza. Movies. Video games. Mason cheating at cards and denying it with the confidence of a corrupt politician. Caleb could survive one evening with Adrian somewhere in the same house. Probably. Maybe. God had abandoned him before, but perhaps tonight would be different. 2 hours later, Caleb had almost relaxed. Almost. Then Adrian walked through the living room, carrying coffee. At 10:30 at night. Psychotic behavior. "You're drinking coffee now?" Caleb asked before remembering he wasn't supposed to be monitoring Adrian's beverage habits. Adrian stopped. "You want one?" "No," a pause. "Yes." Adrian's mouth curved. "Vanilla. 2 sugars. Too much milk." Caleb froze. Mason kept playing the game. Caleb stared at Adrian. "How do you know that?" Adrian shrugged. "You always order it that way." "Always." Caleb had maybe consumed coffee around Adrian 4 times in his entire life. Possibly 5. Not that Caleb had counted. He had counted. "That's creepy," Mason said without looking up. "Thank you," Caleb said. Adrian disappeared into the kitchen. Caleb watched him go. Mason threw a cushion at his face. "Stop staring at my brother." "I wasn't." "You were." "I was looking toward the kitchen." "At his ass." Caleb nearly inhaled his own tongue. "What?" Mason laughed. Caleb threw the cushion back hard enough to qualify as attempted murder. Outside, thunder rolled. Neither of them paid attention. Not yet. By 11, rain hammered against the windows. By 11:15, Sophie had texted that several roads were flooding. At 11:20, Mason's phone rang. His expression changed immediately. "Natalie." Caleb lowered his controller. Mason stood. "What happened?" A pause. "Where are you?" Another. "Stay in the car." "I'm coming." He hung up and grabbed his keys. Caleb frowned. "What's wrong?" "Natalie's car died near Westbridge. She's stranded." "In this weather?" "Exactly. I'll come." "No. It'll be faster alone." Mason was already pulling on his jacket. Adrian appeared in the doorway. "You sure the road's open?" "For now." "Text me." Mason nodded, then looked at Caleb. "Don't leave. The buses stopped running, and rideshare's a disaster." Caleb glanced outside. Rain blurred the entire street. "Fine. Adrian's here." That was not reassuring. Mason left. The front door slammed. Silence settled over the house. Caleb slowly turned. Adrian stood across the room. Just the 2 of them now. Fantastic. Adrian's gaze dropped to the sleeping bag still rolled beside the couch. Something unreadable crossed his face. Then he looked back at Caleb. Mason didn't tell you? Caleb frowned. Tell me what? Adrian hesitated. And suddenly Caleb had the distinct feeling his night was about to become much more complicated. He isn't staying here tonight. He isn't staying here tonight. Caleb stared at Adrian, then at the front door, then back at Adrian. I'm sorry. What? Adrian folded his arms. Mason was supposed to stay at Natalie's after the sleepover. Caleb blinked. The sleepover he invited me to? Yes. The sleepover occurring in his house. That one. And he planned to leave? Adrian nodded. Caleb looked toward the door again. His best friend had abandoned him during a thunderstorm in a house with the one man Caleb had spent 3 years attempting not to find attractive. This felt targeted. I'm going to kill him. Get in line. Caleb grabbed his phone. 3% battery. Excellent. He called Mason anyway. Straight to voicemail. Coward. Thunder cracked outside hard enough to shake the windows. Caleb flinched. Adrian noticed. Of course he noticed. I can drive you home. No, the answer came too fast. Adrian raised an eyebrow. I mean, you don't have to. I offered. Yes, but there's approximately an ocean falling from the sky. As if summoned by the insult, rain slammed harder against the windows. Adrian glanced outside. Fair. I'll get a rideshare. Caleb opened the app. Searching. 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 No drivers available. He tried another. Cancelled. A third quoted a price that suggested the driver would personally carry Caleb home on a golden throne. Nope. Bus. Suspended. Friend. Sophie lives 40 minutes away and would make me repay her in emotional blackmail. Adrian's mouth twitched. So you're staying. Caleb looked at him. That sounded dangerously intimate for a completely practical statement. I guess. You sound thrilled. I'm processing. You do that a lot. Only during emergencies. Adrian looked around the perfectly intact living room. This is an emergency? Caleb met his eyes. You have no idea. Adrian laughed. Caleb immediately regretted being funny. Because Adrian laughing was worse than Adrian smiling. Smiling was survivable. Laughing did things to the corners of his eyes. Caleb looked away. Anyway, sleeping bag. Couch. Problem solved. Very brave. I'm adaptable. You complained for 20 minutes because Mason bought the wrong pizza crust. That was thin crust. There are standards. Another rumble rolled through the house. The lights flickered. Once. Twice. Caleb pointed upward. Don't. Don't what? Do the horror movie thing. I'm standing here. You have older brother energy. The universe listens to you. I don't think that's how weather works. You don't know. The lights steadied. Caleb exhaled. Adrian disappeared into the kitchen and returned with the coffee he'd made earlier. He handed it over. Caleb took a cautious sip. Vanilla. 2 sugars. Embarrassingly too much milk. Exactly right. You really remembered. Adrian's eyes met his. I remember things. Something in the way he said it made Caleb's fingers tighten around the mug. Dangerous sentence. Very dangerous sentence. So, Caleb said, because silence had become hostile, why are you back? Adrian's expression shifted. Home. Yeah. Mason said you liked your job. I did. Past tense. Adrian looked toward the rain-dark window. Things changed. That was clearly the end of that conversation. Caleb recognized emotional barbed wire when he saw it. Okay. Adrian glanced back, almost surprised Caleb hadn't pushed. Before either could speak again, something slammed upstairs. Both froze. Caleb slowly lowered his coffee. What was that? Adrian was already moving. Stay here. Caleb followed immediately. Adrian looked back. I said stay. And I ignored you. Clearly. They reached the stairs. Another sound came from above. A heavy, irregular tapping. Caleb swallowed. If a murderer comes through the window, I want it officially recorded that this was Mason's fault. It's rain. You don't know that. I'm fairly confident. They reached the 2nd floor. The sound was louder now. Tap. 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 Adrian stopped outside Mason's bedroom. His expression changed. That's not good. Caleb peered around his shoulder. Water was spreading beneath the bedroom door. Oh. Adrian opened it. A stream of rainwater ran down the wall beneath the window, soaking the carpet. A dark stain had already spread across the ceiling. Oh, that is extremely not good. Buckets, Adrian said. Where? Garage. Caleb ran. For the next 10 minutes. Awkwardness disappeared beneath towels, buckets, swearing, and Caleb nearly falling down the stairs while carrying a plastic storage bin. When he returned, Adrian was dragging Mason's desk away from the wet wall. "Help me." Together they moved it. Another drop landed on Caleb's forehead. He looked up. The ceiling gave a disturbing little creak. "Adrian, I heard it. Should ceilings make that sound?" "No, wonderful." Then another crash came from downstairs. They both stopped. Adrian closed his eyes. Caleb stared toward the hallway. "What now?" They hurried downstairs. The living room window had blown partly open. Rain sprayed across the floor, across the couch, across Caleb's carefully arranged sleeping bag. Caleb stood there in silence. His sleeping bag sagged with water. Adrian looked at it, then at Caleb, then slowly toward the staircase. Caleb followed his gaze. "No, I haven't said anything. You don't need to. My room's dry." "Absolutely not. There's one bed." Caleb stared at him. Adrian stared back. Thunder shook the windows. And somewhere far away, Caleb imagined Mason laughing himself to death. "If you laugh, I'm leaving." Caleb pointed at Adrian with a dripping towel. Adrian looked at the flooded couch, the soaked sleeping bag hanging over Caleb's arms, and finally at Caleb himself. "Leaving how?" Caleb opened his mouth, closed it. Outside, rain hammered the windows with enough force to answer for him. "I'll improvise. You couldn't get a rideshare 20 minutes ago. I'll build a boat." "With what?" "Your personality. It seems emotionally waterproof." Adrian stared at him for half a second before laughing. Caleb hated that laugh. More specifically, he hated what it did to him. The little crease beside Adrian's eyes. The way his shoulders relaxed. The completely unreasonable warmth that spread through Caleb's chest because apparently his standards had collapsed to handsome man finds me funny. "Buckets first," Adrian said. "Then you can insult me. I can multitask." They spent the next half hour fighting the house. Mason's bedroom got 3 buckets, 6 towels, and 1 saucepan Caleb insisted made the operation look professionally underfunded. Downstairs, Adrian forced the living room window shut, while Caleb mopped rainwater from the floor. Somewhere between emergency towel number 4 and Adrian swearing at a warped window latch, Caleb stopped feeling awkward. There wasn't time. Adrian wasn't Mason's intimidating older brother anymore. He was just a guy with wet hair falling over his forehead, barefoot on hardwood, trying to keep his parents' house from becoming an indoor swimming pool. "Hand me that towel," Adrian said. Caleb grabbed it, stepped backward, and his heel landed directly in a puddle. "Oh, sure." The floor disappeared beneath him. A hand caught his arm. Another landed firmly around his waist. Caleb stopped falling. Unfortunately, every other bodily function stopped too. Adrian had pulled him against his chest. Close. Extremely close. Close enough that Caleb could see a tiny scar beneath Adrian's jaw. Close enough to feel the heat of Adrian's hand through his shirt. Close enough to realize Adrian smelled like coffee and clean laundry, which was information Caleb absolutely did not need stored permanently in his brain. "Got you," Adrian murmured. Caleb looked up. Mistake. Adrian was already looking at him. Neither moved. The storm filled the silence for them. Caleb became aware that his hand had grabbed Adrian's shoulder. Adrian became aware of it too. His eyes flicked down, then back up. Caleb's heart attempted to escape through his throat. "I'm good," he said. His voice came out approximately 1 octave too high. Adrian's hand remained at his waist. 1 second. 2. Then Adrian released him. "Careful." "Yep." Caleb stepped away. "Very careful. Famous for it." He immediately walked into the coffee table. Adrian covered his mouth. "Don't." "I didn't say anything. Your face did." Caleb grabbed another towel and fled toward the couch before dignity suffered additional casualties. 10 minutes later, the worst of the water was contained. Caleb dropped onto a dry dining chair. "I think we won." Adrian surveyed the room. "Against weather?" "Yes. Weather is still happening." "Then we're winning on points." Thunder rolled again, softer now. Adrian picked up Caleb's sleeping bag. Water dripped from one corner. "This is done. It can dry." Adrian squeezed it once. Water poured onto the floor. Caleb sighed. "It can dry eventually. Not tonight. I have the couch." Adrian looked at him. Caleb followed his gaze. The cushions were dark with rainwater. "Right. Mason's room is out." "Right. Guest room's full of boxes since I moved back." Caleb narrowed his eyes. "I don't like where this inventory is going." Adrian ignored him. My room is dry. The floor sounds excellent. You're not sleeping on the floor. I've slept on floors. When? College. That isn't an answer. It explains enough. Adrian shook his head and gathered the wet towels. Caleb watched him walk toward the laundry room. Something had changed. Not dramatically. Nothing had happened. Adrian had caught him. That was all. A normal reflex. A hand at his waist meant nothing. The fact that it had stayed there slightly too long also meant nothing. Probably. Caleb looked at the ceiling. You're being stupid, he whispered. Who are you talking to? Caleb nearly fell off the chair. Adrian stood in the doorway. God. And he agrees with me. Adrian smiled. Come upstairs. Caleb's stomach flipped. That sentence needs context. I'll find you something dry to wear. Oh, what did you think I meant? Nothing. Your face says otherwise. My face is a liar. Adrian's bedroom was annoyingly neat. Dark blue walls. Books stacked beside the bed. One lamp glowing warmly because the storm had apparently decided electricity could survive just long enough to embarrass Caleb personally. Adrian opened a drawer and handed him a gray t-shirt. Their fingers brushed. Tiny contact. Still enough. Caleb pulled his hand back. Adrian noticed. Again. Of course he did. Bathrooms across the hall, Adrian said quietly. Caleb changed and returned wearing Adrian's shirt, which was too large and smelled faintly like him. This was becoming psychological warfare. Adrian had already placed an extra blanket on the bed. Caleb stopped in the doorway. No, Adrian looked up. Caleb, one bed. It's a queen. That is still mathematically one bed. I'll sleep on the floor. Absolutely not. Then what do you suggest? Caleb looked at the bed. At Adrian. Back at the bed. His brain produced no survivable option. Adrian waited. Caleb exhaled. Fine. Fine. We share. Adrian went very still. Caleb pointed at him. But there will be rules. Rules? Yes. Caleb grabbed 2 pillows and dropped them decisively down the center of the mattress. Adrian stared at the barrier. Is that a wall? Caleb added a 3rd pillow. It is now. That is not a wall. Adrian stared at the 3 pillows Caleb had arranged down the center of the mattress. Caleb added a 4th. It has borders. It separates territories. It's a wall. It's memory foam. History's greatest civilizations started with less. Adrian folded his arms. What exactly do you think is going to happen? Caleb looked at him. That was an extremely dangerous question. Nothing. Then why the wall? Insurance. Against me? Against unconscious migration. Adrian's mouth twitched. You move in your sleep? I don't know. I'm asleep when it happens. Strong argument. Caleb climbed onto his side of the bed and pulled the blanket to his chest. Adrian switched off the overhead light, leaving only the small lamp beside him. The room softened into amber shadows while rain whispered against the windows. Caleb immediately became aware of everything. Adrian sitting on the opposite edge, the mattress dipping beneath his weight, the quiet sound of him setting his phone on the nightstand, the fact that Caleb was wearing Adrian's shirt. This had been a terrible idea. You comfortable? Adrian asked. Deeply. You're gripping the blanket like it owes you money. Caleb loosened his hands. I'm cold. Adrian reached toward the thermostat. I can turn up the heat. No, too fast. Again. Caleb closed his eyes. I'm fine. Right. The lamp clicked off. Darkness. Caleb stared at the ceiling. The pillow wall suddenly felt less like comedy and more like the final defense of a doomed kingdom. 5 minutes passed. Maybe 10. You awake? Adrian asked. No, impressive. I practice. Adrian laughed quietly. Caleb smiled despite himself. The darkness helped. Without Adrian's face distracting him, conversation became strangely easier. Can I ask you something? Caleb said. Depends. Why did you move back? Silence. Caleb immediately regretted asking. You don't have to answer. The company wanted me to relocate again. Where? San Francisco. And you didn't want to? Adrian shifted on the other side of the pillows. I realized I'd spent 4 years choosing jobs based on how far they could take me from everything familiar. Caleb turned his head toward the darkness. That sounds lonely. Another pause. It was. The honesty caught Caleb off guard. Adrian had always seemed composed. Finished. Like adulthood had arrived at 25 with instructions Caleb somehow never received. I'm supposed to move to Chicago, Caleb said. Adrian went still. For the design job? Caleb frowned. How do you know about that? Mason talks. Mason barely remembers what I major in. He talks more than you think. Caleb smiled. I haven't accepted yet. Why not? Because everyone keeps acting like graduation is exciting, and I mostly feel like someone's pushing me toward a cliff with a LinkedIn profile. Adrian laughed softly. That's terrifyingly specific. Thank you. You'd be good in Chicago. Caleb looked toward him, though he could barely make out Adrian's outline. You think? I know. Two simple words. Somehow they landed harder than they should have. You don't know me that well, Caleb said. Adrian didn't answer immediately. Maybe I know more than you think. Caleb's pulse skipped. There it was again. The strange sense that Adrian had been paying attention from a distance. Like my coffee. Like your coffee. Creepy. You keep saying that. Because you keep collecting evidence. Thunder rolled overhead. Caleb flinched before he could stop himself. You hate storms? Adrian asked. I don't hate them. A sharp crack split the sky. Caleb's hand shot sideways. His fingers hit something warm. Adrian's hand. Caleb froze. So did Adrian. Their fingers rested against each other beside the pillow wall. Neither moved. Caleb could have pulled away. He should have. Instead, his little finger remained against Adrian's. Tiny contact. Ridiculous. Yet suddenly Caleb could hear Adrian breathing. Slow. Controlled. Sorry, Caleb whispered. You don't have to apologize. Adrian didn't move his hand. Neither did Caleb. Another rumble faded into the distance. Eventually exhaustion won where common sense had failed. Caleb's eyes grew heavy. The last thing he remembered was Adrian saying his name softly and Caleb mumbling something he hoped wasn't career-ending. When he opened his eyes again, gray morning light filled the room. For several seconds, he forgot where he was. Then he smelled Adrian's shirt, remembered the storm, remembered the bed. Caleb's eyes widened. He looked toward the center of the mattress. The pillow wall was gone. One pillow lay on the floor. Another had somehow migrated toward the foot of the bed. The third was behind Caleb's back. Adrian was still asleep beside him, turned slightly in Caleb's direction, much closer than he had been. Caleb swallowed. Their hands rested between them, less than an inch apart, almost touching. And for reasons Caleb absolutely did not understand, Adrian's fingers were curled toward his as if sometime during the night, one of them had reached for the other. Okay, Caleb whispered to himself. Nobody panic. Adrian remained asleep beside him, which meant Caleb was currently the only person panicking. Excellent. He stared at their hands. Less than an inch separated them. Adrian's fingers were curled slightly toward his, as if sometime during the night they had almost reached for each other and then reconsidered at the last possible second. Caleb carefully pulled his hand away. Adrian shifted. Caleb stopped breathing. Nothing. Still asleep. Good. Caleb slipped out of bed with the precision of a man escaping a crime scene. His bare foot landed on one of the fallen pillows. He looked down at it accusingly. Traitor. The pillow offered no defense. Caleb collected his clothes and headed for the bathroom. 10 minutes later, dressed and marginally less emotionally compromised, he returned to find the bedroom empty. Adrian was probably downstairs. Good. Caleb could survive breakfast. Breakfast had rules. Coffee. Toast. Avoid eye contact with the man whose hand you almost held while unconscious. Standard morning procedure. He reached for his phone on the nightstand and noticed something beside it. A small cardboard box. Plain. Old. A yellow sticky note was attached to the top. One word was written across it. Caleb. His stomach tightened. He shouldn't open it. Obviously. It wasn't his business. Except his name was literally on it, which felt like the universe providing legal counsel. Caleb lifted the lid. Inside was a keychain. Blue enamel. Tiny silver astronaut. Scratched helmet. Caleb stared. No way. He picked it up. He had owned that keychain freshman year. His mother had given it to him before college, telling him that if he was going to shoot for the stars, he might as well carry one around. Caleb had pretended the joke was terrible. He'd secretly loved it. Then he lost the keychain at the Brooks house years ago. He had searched Mason's room, the couch cushions, even the driveway. Nothing. Eventually, he assumed it was gone. Yet here it was. In Adrian's room. In a box. With Caleb's name on it. What the hell? Suddenly, every small thing from last night rearranged itself inside his head. Vanilla. 2 sugars. Too much milk. I remember things. Chicago. Maybe I know more than you think. Caleb looked toward the doorway. Adrian had kept this? Why? Footsteps sounded downstairs. Caleb quickly returned the keychain to the box then immediately felt ridiculous for acting like a burglar. His name was on it. Still, he stepped into the hallway and followed the sound toward the kitchen. Halfway down the stairs, he heard Adrian's voice. Caleb stopped. "No," Adrian said. He was on the phone. A pause. "I already told you. Nothing happened." Caleb's fingers tightened around the railing. He knew listening was wrong. He also knew human morality became surprisingly flexible when your best friend's older brother had apparently preserved your lost belongings like archaeological artifacts. Adrian sighed. "It can't." Caleb went still. Another pause. "Because I made my decision." Something cold slipped beneath Caleb's ribs. "Nothing happened. It can't." Last night flashed through his mind with humiliating clarity. Adrian catching him, the hand at his waist, sharing the bed, their fingers almost touching. Caleb wearing Adrian's shirt. Maybe Adrian had noticed Caleb's crush. Maybe the keychain meant Adrian had once felt something too. And maybe this phone call was Adrian making it painfully clear that whatever almost happened between them could never become anything real. Caleb backed up one step. The floorboard creaked. Silence downstairs. "I'll call you later," Adrian said. Caleb turned and hurried back upstairs before Adrian could see him. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. He had spent one stormy night beside a handsome man and somehow constructed an entire romance out of coffee preferences and damaged pillows. Sophie would have him institutionalized. Caleb entered Adrian's room and put the keychain exactly where he had found it. He was reaching for his overnight bag when Adrian appeared in the doorway. "Morning." Caleb forced a smile. "Morning." Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. "You okay?" "Fantastic." That sounded convincing. "I'm naturally gifted." Adrian leaned against the doorframe. His hair was still messy from sleep. Caleb resented this personally. "Coffee?" Adrian asked. "I can make yours." Of course he could. Caleb zipped his bag harder than necessary. "Black is fine." Adrian frowned. "You hate black coffee." "People change." "Since last night." Transformative storm. Caleb slung the bag over his shoulder. Adrian didn't laugh. He just watched him. Did something happen? Yes. Caleb had discovered that apparently his imagination could generate heartbreak without requiring an actual relationship. No, Adrian's gaze moved toward the nightstand, toward the box, then back to Caleb. Caleb saw the exact moment something shifted in his expression. "You found it." Caleb's throat tightened. "Found what?" Adrian looked at the box. "No point pretending." Caleb exhaled and picked it up. "Why do you have this?" For the first time since Caleb arrived, Adrian looked genuinely caught off guard. "I found it years ago and kept it. I meant to give it back." "For years." Adrian said nothing. Caleb held up the little astronaut between them. "Why?" Adrian's jaw tightened. Before he could answer, Caleb heard the phone conversation again in his head. "Nothing happened. It can't." And suddenly Caleb wasn't sure he wanted the answer at all. "Why?" Caleb asked again. Adrian's eyes stayed on the tiny astronaut dangling between Caleb's fingers. For several seconds, he said nothing. Caleb hated that silence because it gave his brain enough time to invent 17 answers, 16 of which involved rejection and one involving Adrian secretly running an international keychain smuggling operation. "Forget it." Caleb put the keychain back into the box. "Caleb, you found it. You forgot to return it." "Mystery solved." "That isn't what happened." "It's fine. You keep saying that when you're clearly not fine." Caleb laughed once. "Maybe I'm trying something new." He placed the box on the nightstand and reached for his bag. Adrian stepped away from the doorway, giving him room to pass. Of course he did. Somehow that made Caleb more irritated. "Did you hear my phone call?" Caleb stopped. "Damn." Slowly he turned. "Some of it." Adrian closed his eyes briefly. "How much?" Caleb considered lying. "Enough." That's not an answer. Neither is keeping someone's lost keychain for years. Adrian's jaw tightened. Caleb immediately regretted the sharpness in his voice, but embarrassment had already taken control of the vehicle. "Look, you don't have to explain anything. Nothing happened." "I understand." Adrian stared at him. "Do you?" "Yes." "Because I don't think you do." "You literally said those words." "Nothing happened." Followed by "it can't." Very subtle. Understanding moved across Adrian's face. Then, impossibly, he laughed. Caleb's humiliation caught fire. "Wow." "No, Caleb, glad this is funny." "I'm not laughing at you." "Excellent distinction." Caleb moved toward the hallway. Adrian's voice stopped him. "The call was from my former boss." Caleb paused. What? She wants me back. Adrian leaned against the dresser. The San Francisco position is still open. She asked whether anything had changed. Caleb said nothing. Nothing happened, Adrian continued. Meaning nothing happened that would make me reconsider leaving the company. It can't, meaning going back isn't happening. Because I already made my decision. Caleb stared at him. Somewhere inside his skull, every conclusion from the previous 10 minutes collapsed simultaneously. Oh, Adrian's eyebrow lifted. Yeah. So that wasn't about. Caleb gestured vaguely between them. Adrian's gaze followed the movement. Us. The word landed softly. Dangerously. Caleb swallowed. There is no us. Something unreadable crossed Adrian's face. Right. That should have made things easier. It did not. Caleb looked down at the keychain box. Then explained that. Adrian went quiet again. I found it under the radiator after you stopped looking. Why didn't you give it to Mason? I could have. But you didn't. No, why? Adrian rubbed his thumb across his palm. A tiny nervous movement Caleb had never seen before. Adrian Brooks got nervous? Apparently the apocalypse had survived the storm. I was going to give it back the next time you came over. I came over approximately 800 times. I know. You remember my coffee. Yes. You knew about Chicago. Yes. You kept this. Caleb lifted the box. Yes. And every time I was here, you acted like being in the same room with me was an inconvenience. Adrian flinched. Barely. But Caleb saw it. I never thought you were an inconvenience. You barely talked to me. That was intentional. Caleb's chest tightened. That is not helping. I know. Adrian took one step forward, then stopped, still leaving space between them. You want the truth? Caleb's mouth had gone dry. That would be a refreshing change. Adrian looked at the floor for a moment. When he raised his eyes again, all the easy amusement from last night was gone. You were Mason's friend. Still am. You were always here. On that couch. In the kitchen. Raiding our refrigerator like groceries were a community resource. Mason invited me to do that. You didn't need an invitation. Despite everything, Caleb almost smiled. Adrian continued. And then one day, I started noticing when you weren't here. Caleb went very still. Rain tapped softly against the bedroom window. Nothing like last night's violence now. Just a quiet rhythm beneath Adrian's voice. I found the keychain after you left one afternoon, Adrian said. I picked it up and thought I'd return it the next time I saw you. But you didn't. No, why? Adrian's eyes dropped to the little astronaut. Because then I'd have to explain why I kept carrying it around instead of leaving it somewhere Mason could give it back. Caleb's heartbeat stumbled. You carried it around? Adrian gave a small, humorless laugh. For longer than I'd like to admit. Caleb could barely process that. The coffee. The distance. The way Adrian had caught him last night and held on 1 second too long. The missing pillow wall. Then why avoid me? Caleb whispered. Adrian's expression changed. Softer now. Almost vulnerable. Because you were younger. Because you were my little brother's best friend. Because you trusted this house enough to walk into it whenever you wanted, and I never wanted you wondering whether I was waiting for something from you. Caleb's anger disappeared so quickly it left him dizzy. Adrian. So I kept my distance. And the keychain? Adrian looked at him for a long moment. Then he took the little box from Caleb, opened it, and ran his thumb gently across the scratched blue astronaut. I tried to throw it away once. Caleb's breath caught. Adrian gave the smallest shake of his head. I couldn't. Why? Adrian finally met his eyes. Because throwing it away felt too much like admitting I needed to forget you. Because throwing it away felt too much like admitting I needed to forget you. Caleb forgot every sarcastic response he had ever learned. Which was impressive. Sarcasm had carried him through most of adulthood. You needed to forget me? Adrian looked down at the keychain. I thought I did. Caleb's heartbeat became painfully noticeable. That sounds suspiciously like the beginning of a confession. It probably is. Okay. Caleb swallowed. Just checking. Adrian placed the little astronaut carefully on the dresser. Caleb watched his fingers release it. How long? He asked. Adrian knew exactly what he meant. Long enough. That is an aggressively unhelpful answer. A faint smile appeared. A few years. Caleb stared. Years? Yes. While you were treating me like an annoying piece of furniture? I never treated you like furniture. You once walked into the kitchen, saw me eating cereal, and immediately walked back out. Adrian rubbed a hand over his face. I remember. I thought you hated me. I was trying very hard not to stare at you. Caleb's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Adrian Brooks had apparently been avoiding him because he was attracted to him. Caleb needed to sit down. He did, right on the edge of the bed where the pillow wall had suffered its mysterious overnight death. This is insane. Probably. I had a crush on you. Adrian froze. Caleb froze too. Apparently his mouth had decided privacy was no longer part of its job description. Had? Adrian asked quietly. Caleb looked up. That one word contained an offensively large amount of hope. That is what you're focusing on. It seemed important. You're impossible. Caleb. He exhaled. Fine. I started liking you when I was 19. Adrian's expression tightened immediately. That's exactly why I stayed away. Because I was 19? Because you were 19, Mason's best friend, and in this house constantly. You trusted me. Adrian sat in the chair across from him rather than beside him. More distance. Always distance. If I'd made a move and you didn't want it, what then? Would you stop coming over? Would things get weird with Mason? Would you feel like you had to avoid me in a place where you were supposed to feel comfortable? Caleb's embarrassment softened into something else. Understanding. So you decided for both of us. Adrian winced. Yes. That was stupid. Also yes. Caleb almost smiled. You're agreeing very easily. I've had years to review the evidence. The room went quiet. Morning light had brightened across the floor. The storm was almost gone now, leaving only occasional drops against the glass. Caleb looked at Adrian differently. The man he had spent years believing was indifferent suddenly seemed less untouchable. Adrian wasn't calm because he felt nothing. He had been calm because feeling something frightened him enough to control every inch of distance between them. And now? Caleb asked. Adrian's eyes lifted. Now you're 22. Correct. Excellent math. You have your own life. Your own choices. His gaze held Caleb's. I don't get to make them for you. Caleb's pulse jumped. That still doesn't answer my question. Adrian was silent. Caleb leaned forward. Do you still like me? Caleb. That sounded like a warning. It was. Why? Adrian laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Because I'm trying very hard to do this correctly. Maybe stop trying so hard. Adrian stared at him. Caleb surprised himself by holding the gaze. No panic. Well, some panic. A medically concerning amount of panic. But underneath it was something steadier. Yes, Adrian finally said. I still want you. Caleb's breath caught. There it was. No misunderstanding. No overheard phone call. No keychain requiring forensic analysis. Just the truth. Then what's stopping you now? Adrian looked toward Caleb's overnight bag. Chicago. Caleb's stomach sank slightly. I haven't accepted. But you want the job. Maybe. You should take it if you do. The answer irritated Caleb for reasons he couldn't immediately explain. You're telling me to leave? No, Adrian stood. I'm telling you I won't ask you to stay. That stopped him. Adrian moved toward the window, hands slipping into his pockets. You've worked for this. I'm not going to turn one night into a reason you change your future. One night? Caleb asked. Adrian turned. This hasn't been one night for me. The words landed softly. Harder because of that. I finally let myself want something, Adrian said, at exactly the moment you're leaving. For the first time, Caleb saw it clearly. Adrian wasn't rejecting him. He was afraid. Not of Mason. Not anymore. Not even of Caleb. He was afraid of wanting something he might immediately lose. And strangely, that made Caleb feel brave. He stood. Adrian watched him approach. One step, then another. Caleb stopped directly in front of him. You know, he said, for someone determined not to make my choices for me, you're still doing an impressive amount of deciding what happens next. Adrian's breath caught. Caleb smiled. The balance between them shifted. Maybe, Caleb said softly, you should let me decide whether Chicago means this ends before it starts. Maybe, Caleb said softly, you should let me decide whether Chicago means this ends before it starts. Adrian stared at him. For once, there was no clever answer. No calm older brother composure. Just surprise. Caleb enjoyed that more than was probably healthy. You're very quiet, he said. I'm thinking. Dangerous. Adrian's mouth twitched. You were terrified of sharing a bed with me 6 hours ago. I've experienced significant personal growth. In 6 hours? I'm efficient. Adrian laughed, and some of the tension loosened. But Caleb wasn't finished. He looked toward the bed. The ruined pillow wall had been reconstructed badly near the foot of the mattress, one pillow still lying sideways like a casualty of war. Sit down. Adrian raised an eyebrow. That sounded authoritative. Don't ruin it. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed. After a moment, Adrian joined him. Not too close. Naturally, Caleb looked at the space between them. You really are committed to that distance thing. Adrian's eyes dropped between them. Habit. Maybe it's a bad one. Silence. Caleb's heart started pounding again, but he refused to retreat into jokes. Mostly. Hypothetical question. Those are rarely safe with you. If I wasn't leaving for Chicago, what would you do? Adrian went still. Caleb. Answer. I'd ask you out. Simple. Immediate. Caleb swallowed. Dinner. Probably. Somewhere expensive? You're demanding. I'm evaluating the offer. Adrian smiled. Somewhere nice. Would you wear a suit? Do you have a suit fetish I should know about? Caleb nearly choked. Okay. Conversation over. Adrian laughed. Caleb shoved his shoulder, but this time when his hand touched Adrian, he didn't pull away immediately. Neither did Adrian. The laughter faded. Caleb's palm rested lightly against Adrian's upper arm. Warm skin beneath his fingers. Adrian looked at him. You still can, Caleb said. What? Ask me out. Adrian's breathing changed. Barely. Caleb noticed anyway. Chicago doesn't erase the next few weeks, Caleb continued. And I haven't even accepted the job yet. I don't want you turning it down because of me. Good, because I wouldn't. Adrian blinked. Caleb smiled. What? You wanted honesty. I did. I've worked too hard to make a career decision based on one attractive man and a catastrophic weather event. Attractive. Focus. I'm trying. Poorly. Adrian's eyes dropped to Caleb's mouth. There. Caleb saw it. His pulse jumped. Adrian looked back into his eyes. And if you take the job, then we figure out whether this is worth figuring out. That sounds complicated. You kept a scratched astronaut for years. I think you can handle texting. Adrian laughed softly. Then his expression changed. Warmer. More vulnerable. Can I kiss you? Caleb's entire body went still. After years of wondering. After one night of accidental touches, wrong conclusions, and a pillow wall that had apparently possessed no structural integrity whatsoever, Adrian still asked. He didn't assume. Didn't move closer. Didn't make Caleb's decision for him. Something inside Caleb softened completely. Yes. Adrian lifted one hand slowly, giving Caleb enough time to change his mind. His fingertips touched Caleb's jaw. Warm. Careful. Caleb leaned into them before he could overthink it. Adrian moved closer. The first brush of their mouths was almost absurdly gentle. Caleb had imagined kissing Adrian before. 19-year-old Caleb's imagination had involved significantly more drama and considerably less breathing. Reality was quieter. Better. Adrian kissed him again. Caleb's fingers curled into the front of his shirt. The mattress shifted as the space between them finally disappeared. Adrian's thumb brushed beneath Caleb's cheekbone. Caleb could feel Adrian smiling against his mouth. He pulled back just enough to whisper, What? Nothing. You're smiling. You kissed me. You asked. You said yes. Caleb stared at him. You are embarrassingly easy to impress. Apparently. Caleb kissed him this time. No permission needed because Adrian met him halfway. It was warmer now, less cautious, still gentle, but no longer uncertain. When they separated, Caleb rested his forehead against Adrian's. So he whispered, The sleepover rules have changed. Adrian glanced toward the scattered pillows. Should I rebuild the wall? Touch one pillow, and I'll throw you out the window. Aggressive. Romantic. Adrian laughed. Then a sound came from downstairs. Both froze. A key sliding into the front door lock. Caleb's eyes widened. Adrian looked toward the bedroom door. No, the lock turned. The front door opened. Mason's voice echoed through the house. Guys? I'm back. Caleb stared at Adrian. Adrian stared back. Caleb looked at the bed. At Adrian's shirt he was still wearing. At the destroyed pillow wall. Then at their hands, which were still very obviously tangled together. Well, Caleb whispered. This seems difficult to explain. Guys? I'm back. Caleb stared at Adrian. Adrian stared back. Somewhere downstairs, Mason dropped his keys onto the entry table. We have approximately 10 seconds, Caleb whispered. For what? To make this look normal. Adrian glanced at Caleb wearing his oversized gray t-shirt, then at the destroyed pillow wall, then at their still intertwined fingers. Define normal. Caleb ripped his hand away. Less like I spent the night in your bed. You did spend the night in my bed. That information does not help us. Footsteps crossed the living room. Caleb jumped up and grabbed a pillow from the floor. "What are you doing?" Adrian asked. "Evidence removal." "It's a pillow. It knows too much." Adrian laughed. "Stop enjoying this." Caleb threw the pillow onto the bed, grabbed his overnight bag, and headed for the door. Adrian followed. They made it halfway downstairs before Mason appeared at the bottom. He looked exhausted. Wet jacket, messy hair, coffee in one hand. His eyes moved from Adrian to Caleb, then to Caleb's shirt, then back to Adrian. Silence. Caleb smiled. "Good morning." Mason pointed at his chest. "Is that Adrian's shirt?" Caleb looked down as if discovering it for the first time. "Huh." Adrian closed his eyes. "Interesting." Mason's gaze narrowed. "Why are you coming out of his room?" "Weather." "Weather put you in Adrian's bedroom?" "It was very aggressive weather." "Caleb." "The couch got soaked." Mason looked at Adrian. "And the guest room?" "Boxes," Adrian said. "My room. Leaking." Mason slowly lowered his coffee. "So you too." Caleb's soul prepared for evacuation. "Shared a bed?" "Technically," Caleb said. "There was a pillow wall." Adrian coughed. Mason stared at him. "Why are you laughing?" "I'm not." "You are." "Internally." "That's worse." Mason looked between them again. His expression changed. Caleb saw the exact second his best friend stopped processing sleeping arrangements and started noticing everything else. The awkward distance. Adrian's inability to stop smiling. Caleb's face, which was probably broadcasting "I kissed your brother" in high definition. "Oh my God," Mason said. Caleb considered running into the storm. "Mason, you like him." Caleb froze. Mason wasn't looking at him. He was looking at Adrian. Adrian's smile disappeared. "Mason, you actually like him." Caleb blinked. "Wait. Actually." Mason turned toward him. "You think he remembers everyone's coffee order?" Caleb's mouth opened. Closed. Adrian rubbed his forehead. "Can we not do this in the hallway?" "How long?" Mason demanded. Caleb and Adrian exchanged a glance. "Which part?" Caleb asked. Mason made a sound of suffering. "There are parts." Poor wording. "Extremely." Adrian stepped forward. "Nothing happened until this morning." Mason's eyes snapped to Caleb. Caleb lifted both hands. "One kiss." Adrian glanced at him. Caleb corrected himself. "A small number of kisses." "Caleb, you demanded accuracy." Mason walked into the kitchen. "I need stronger coffee." They followed. Morning sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds, illuminating the aftermath of the storm. Damp towels, buckets, furniture shifted away from windows. Mason took one look around and sighed. "You saved the house." "Mostly," Caleb said. "Your couch died bravely." Mason poured coffee. Then he turned to Adrian. The comedy disappeared from his face. "Are you serious about him?" Caleb stopped breathing. Adrian didn't hesitate. "Yes." One word. "Immediate." "Certain." Caleb looked at him. Something warm tightened behind his ribs. Mason studied his brother. "Because he's my best friend." "I know. And if this is just because you moved home and got lonely, it isn't." "And Chicago?" Caleb frowned. "Why does everyone know about Chicago?" "Because you've talked about that job for 6 months." "Apparently, I need new friends." Mason ignored him. Adrian looked at Caleb. "Chicago is his decision." Mason nodded once. That seemed to matter. "Good." Caleb blinked. "That's it." Mason looked at him. "What did you expect? More yelling. Possibly a duel." "I'm tired." "Fair. Also, Adrian has been weird about you for years." Adrian nearly choked. "Excuse me. You asked whether Caleb was dating anyone every time you called. I asked how everyone was. Then mysteriously asked follow-up questions only about him." Caleb slowly smiled. Adrian looked betrayed. "You're a terrible brother. And yet I invited your crush to sleepover." Mason took a sip of coffee. Everyone went silent. Caleb narrowed his eyes. "Wait." Mason immediately became interested in his mug. "Did you know Adrian would be here?" "Maybe." "Mason, I didn't plan the storm." "You planned something?" Adrian demanded. Mason backed toward the doorway. "Natalie needs me." "Natalie isn't here." "Emotionally, she does." He disappeared. Caleb stared after him. "I'm going to kill him." "Get in line," Adrian said. Caleb laughed. An hour later, the rain had stopped completely. Caleb stood by the front door with his overnight bag over one shoulder. Adrian approached holding the little astronaut keychain. "You forgot something." Caleb smiled and took it. "Apparently I did." He clipped it onto his bag. "So, Chicago." Adrian's expression softened. Take the job if you want it. And us? Adrian hesitated. Dinner first. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Somewhere nice. Very. Suit. Adrian laughed. I'll consider it. Caleb stepped closer. Then ask me. Adrian looked directly into his eyes. Caleb Foster, will you go on a date with me before you leave? Yes. No hesitation. No misunderstanding. Adrian kissed him once, softly, beside the front door. When Caleb finally stepped outside, sunlight was breaking through the last gray clouds. He had arrived expecting pizza, horror movies, and one completely ordinary sleepover with his best friend. Instead, he had spent the night beside the man he'd spent years trying not to want. Caleb touched the little astronaut hanging from his bag and smiled. For once, he was very glad he hadn't gone home.